Okay, I guess I'll get started. Just to warn you, I put this presentation together today at work. I'm not going to get into the reason why, but yeah, so just bear with me. This is just supposed to be just in general the materials and what goes into taking planetary pictures. I'm not going to get down to the nitty-gritty procedures and the science and whatnot behind it. We'll just basically touch on what you're getting yourself into if you want to pursue planetary imaging. So I'll go ahead and get started here. Share my screen. Okay, so there we go. Minimize these other windows here. So again, because I'm usually the host, those who haven't heard yet, I usually keep track of the chat window, or if anybody speaks up, you can ask your question like that. But normally I would take a look at the chat window if anybody really wants to ask a question, and I would usually courteously, that is such a word, interrupt the presenter and bring up the question that was posted in the on the chat window. But since I am the presenter this time, I don't have that luxury. So anybody who has any questions, just feel free to speak up, and we'll see how this goes. Hopefully it'll be wonderful and not a supernova. There you go. Haha. Could have read the cue card, but I went for a zinger. So, all right. I guess I'll leave that right there. Okay. Well, anyway, so this is all about planetary imaging acquisition. When I say acquisition and planetary imaging acquisition, I'm just going to talk to you about what I do to capture my planetary recordings. So I'm not going to go into the processing of the actual recordings themselves, but I'll show you the end result. We'll say processing planetary images for another time. Otherwise, I guess let's get the ball rolling. So let's see. So, all right. If it will roll, there we go. Okay, so planetary imaging acquisition. Don't think yeah, okay. Looks like it doesn't matter. Okay, so the three necessities of a planetary imaging setup, of course, I don't only have three listed here. Some people will say, okay, well, what about your telescope mount and whatnot? Well, obviously, the requirements that you have here should tell you exactly what equipment you'll need to fulfill or will be able to handle these three that I have here. So large aperture, long focal length telescope is what you want because planets are so tiny, you need a lot of focal length to collect enough light so that when you want to extend your focal length for actually imaging the planet, it's not going to show up dark, and the resolution of the planet will be, pretty good. Of course, you're always at the mercy of seeing. You're going to hear me say that a lot. Smooth focusing, that's something else that you want, because otherwise you're going to focus on a planet, especially you don't want to do it, especially during the recording, but you will drive yourself nuts because you'll see as if the planet's just jumping all over the place, and other things can happen like image shift whenever you're focusing. So you want to be careful of that as well. And then finally, just like all imaging, color or mono camera. So basically, I'm just going to tell you what's possible with color cameras and mono cameras. So anyway, so we'll talk about the scope. So the characteristics or the types of scopes in this case that are suited for planetary imaging are mostly Newtonians and Cassegrains. I've seen people where they've imaged with other types of scopes, but the ones that will dominate the hobby for imaging planets will be Newtonians and Cassegrains. I find, in my experience, I find that any aperture of 6" or more is what you would want to get decent results with imaging the planets. 6" I put that as a minimum because, again, going back, I'm saying this out of my own experience, I used to have a Maxidov Cassegrain telescope that, like the Schmidt Cassegrain that most people are familiar with, works similar to that. But anyway, this Maxidov Cassegrain, I was able to image Mars, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn. That's about it. Mostly, I was able to image the sun, but I didn't do very much in that regard. And I've since sold that scope. But anyway, but that was a 6" scope, and yeah, the results I got out of it, well, they were the results. Yeah, they were what they were. Next, well, basically, you want to get up and close and personal to of these tiny objects. Planets, again, are small, so you're going to need a lot of focal length. I put 1,000 here because I did that with the Schmidt Maxidov Cassegrain that I have using a reducer with Venus, and I was able to get a nice tight crescent of Venus. So I know it's possible. And for getting images at 1,000 millimeters. But your focal length is always going to be dependent on, once again, the scene. So, okay, so the Newtonian, what's nice about the Newtonian is that you can make them yourself. Okay, there's a lot of people in the club, quite a few people in the club that have actually made their made Newtonians. It seems like they're the easiest scopes to make out there for amateurs. But you see this one guy right here, Mike K. Phillips. He actually lives here in Apex. I've never run across him, never really reached out and tried to meet up with him once, but you may have seen some of his material on cloudy nights, and he's a friend of mine on cloudy nights, and we talk once in a while. But that's what he has there is a good example of what a nice planetary Newtonian would look like. Okay, so you see it's huge, right? And he's got it mounted on a CGE. I think that's just a regular CGE Celestron mount, which can handle a scope like that. I mean, it's kind of deceiving what he has there because I believe that tube that he has there, it looks silver. I don't think it's metal. I think that's actually a cardboard a cement column mold where you would use to pour concrete into to make cement columns or whatever. Yeah, it's just cardboard, so it makes the whole thing lighter. But again, you see how big it is. It's pretty cumbersome right there. So yeah, for him, that scope right there is 14 inches in diameter. So he made that, and it's an f5. So I don't, let's see, 300, 350. So it's a 350 millimeter aperture, or that's how big around that mirror is in there. That's how much, how big of a mirror it is to collect all that light. So I don't know, 35 times a 5, here 2, that's 7,500. I don't know, maybe I'm just counting that wrong. But anyway, so yeah, he has an f5 there. Now he can extend it using a Barlow, but going back to this the subject of the scope, a Newtonian, what's nice about it versus like a Cassegrain, or if you want to image through a refractor, is that had that bullet point there, it collects clean light and that all wavelengths are reflected equally. Okay, so photons are coming into a Newtonian and they're just bouncing. Okay, they're bouncing from one mirror, from the primary mirror to the secondary mirror, and then out to your camera sensor, and whether or not you have other lens elements in the way. In between that is depends on the imaging train that's attached to it. So when I say clean, what you'll find out, and I'll show a few examples of this phenomenon, is that wavelengths that are of higher frequency, like UV or just plain old blue, suffer from contrast due to the atmosphere, and also they tend to bounce off glass in general. So if you have a mirror that has a reflective surface, it's not going to really bounce off glass. It's just going to bounce off a reflective surface. So what's really true about this is when you get to like UV wavelengths, which are really hard to capture with a Schmidt-Cassegrain. But Mike Phillips here, if you ever go to his website, I'll post a few links. He has some really good material of Venus in the UV. And what I'm getting at, if you photograph Venus in the UV, you'll pick up cloud detail. Because most of the time when you observe Venus, all you see is just a crescent, and that's about it. And if you try to do it in UV, you're just going to get a blurred image unless the seeing at the time is absolutely spectacular. And I have run across instances where I have been able to capture cloud detail on Venus. So anyway, that's what I mean by clean light. Fast cool down time. Well, it's an open tube, so you want your optics to be calibrated to the environment where you're going to be or the ambient temperature of the environment that you're going to be imaging. So because you have an open tube, the mirrors are able to cool down faster. So next we go to Schmidt-Cassegrain, and pretty much the advantages of Schmidt-Cassegrain are kind of the opposite of the Newtonian. Your run-of-the-mill Cassegrain, which basically I mean the F10 focal ratios of the Meade telescopes and Celestron's telescopes. When I say run-of-the-mill, that's mostly what I'm thinking about. Now, if you go back and you look at a Newtonian, the light comes in straight and then goes back to the secondary there, and out to the camera sensor. In the case of Schmidt-Cassegrain, as everybody knows, light comes into the tube. It hits a corrector, but it comes into the tube and reflects off the big giant primary, and then comes back and hits the secondary back here, and then finally goes out to your camera sensor. Okay. So what's nice about that is you're folding the light path in half. I'm just making up an arbitrary number there. It's not necessarily half, but you're folding the light path and making it for a shorter distance for the light to travel. So unlike a Newtonian there, you're folding the light in half, so it makes your tube shorter, all right? So the other advantage of, I don't have a, I touch on it a little bit here, but because it has a long focal length and the nature of the mirrors, I believe the primary mirror in most Schmidt-Cassegrains is an F2, whereas the secondary mirror is not flat like a Newtonian, but it also has an F ratio of 5. So you take 5 times 2. Again, going back to that term there, run-of-the-mill Schmidt-Cassegrains have a focal ratio of F10. So what's nice about that is your focal length is already pretty long. Like the one I'm about to show you behind me is actually the one that's pictured there. That's a C11, and it's the diameter of the primary is 11 inches, of course, and it comes out to be 2,800 millimeters in as far as metrics go. But because it's an F10, 10 times 2,800, that's easy to remember, comes out to be 2,800 millimeters. Okay, so it's going back to what I was saying in an earlier slide, 1,000 millimeters or more, well, it's already there. So we can go ahead and increase the focal length if you want to throw in the Barlow, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So, but that little bullet point there, short wavelength light is lost at the corrector plate, because like I was saying, over here you have 2 reflective surfaces. You're not going through a corrector because a Newtonian does not have one on the front of it. Okay, so some wavelengths will bounce off, so you start to lose contrast, or the variety of wavelengths that you could collect using Newtonian are lost with a Schmidt-Cassegrain. All right, so And in most cases, those are the longer wavelengths going from the very end of the blue visible spectrum all the way to purple, ultraviolet, and everywhere further. I think one of the popular wavelengths that a lot of people like to image, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, you can speak up and interrupt me if I'm wrong, but a popular wavelength is the methane band for looking at, that's part of the spectrum on Jupiter. And I believe that's at a very short wavelength. It's over in the purple end of the spectrum. So anyway, I think I got that right. Anyway, so yeah, getting back to the Schmidt-Cassegrain, yeah, you do lose the wavelength, but again, it's not as cumbersome as the the Newtonian. And the cool down time is slower. Why? Well, because unlike the Newtonian, which is nice and open tube to vent all that heat to get to the ambient temperature of outside, you don't have that luxury here. So what some people will do is they'll stick a, what I've seen is I think it's like a portable Peltier cooler that's like shaped like a wand, and they'll shove that into the back of the Schmidt, and it just sits in there and it cools down the tube faster. And I've seen, I think Mike Heath, one of the club co-chairs, has one of those. I don't know if he still uses it or not, but anyway, so that's my SCT. We'll take a tour of it later behind me. We'll look at the setup. And anyway, yeah, I've enjoyed SCTs. My previous SCT was a C9.25, so which was also made by Celestron. That's where the C comes from. And but this is a C11. This next model up. So okay, blah blah blah. Yeah, so you need smooth focusing. So so you have a manual focuser. I mean, that's how I started out. And some of the recordings I'll show you, or I have a few time lapses where that's what I have is a manual focuser, and it's brutal to do it by manually when you can do it by electronic, which we'll talk about in the next slide. But of course, the hardest thing about it is to make sure that you get your object in focus without shaking it around at the same time, because when it shakes around, who knows if you had hit the sweet spot focusing of a nice crisp focus of the planet, you'll have no idea because it was shaking around. So it takes a lot of trial and error if you want to use a focuser manually. But you know, there's some options on focusers that make it easier. This is a Crayford focuser that you can get added to your Schmidt-Cassegrain. This is a Moonlight focuser. The Moonlight brand also makes an SCT or Schmidt-Cassegrain model and a Newtonian model, and it has the fine focusing knob here, which when you turn that one, it goes 10 times. The focusing, I guess, is 10 times finer than the coarse knob that you have here. So that helps quite a bit right there. And but again, you have to touch it gently or else it'll shake around. So if you, see, make sure about this, hold on. There we go. If you have, if you want to use your Schmidt, if you don't have an aftermarket focuser to put on like a Schmidt-Cassegrain, for example, you can still use the Schmidt-Cassegrain's primary mirror focuser. The way that one works versus a Crayford focuser, where you have the draw tube inside and it just goes in and out as you turn. This knob right here, what is it? You can use don't think that you cannot use the primary mirror focuser that's on the back of a Schmidt-Cassegrain. You can still use that, but it takes quite a bit of grip to get it to move. So what I have right there is a potato chip clip, and you can just clip it onto the knob there, and you can just touch it gently. So the trick there is that if you can get your planet into rough focus, you can use the potato chip clip there and just gently touch it, and and that'll help snap the planet into a nice sharp focus. So anyway, but I believe it's Starlight Instruments. I guess I'll go with Steve or Fulbright. Correct me if I'm wrong. They're the one that also makes a focuser for their primary knob. Am I right? No? Okay. I guess everybody's muted there. But
Chris?
yes.
Yeah, they have one. And, you know, Celestron sells something also, I think, that's mechanical. I mean, motorized.
Okay. Yeah, I think that Rob Orr has one of those. Is that right, Rob? I think you brought it one time to show everybody.
Yeah, I have the motorized one. Mike Keefe bought one. It's really nice. It allows you to zero it. Really well made. Fits most of the SCTs, not all of them. You have to check. I don't think it fits the 9 1/4.
Oh, okay. Yeah, 9 1/4 is kind of special. So. Okay, very good. Let's see. Okay, so electronic focusing. Yeah, definitely makes it easier, but you see at the back there, and I'll show you that later on the my setup behind me. Does definitely help bringing things into focus a lot easier. I mean, electronic focusing, I mean, it's not limited to planetary imaging, but because you, when you take a recording of a planet, you see everything sort of in real time there. And so you understand how shaky the image can get if you do it, you try to focus manually, okay? And then you start to see the huge benefits of what an electronic focuser can do for you. So I don't have any experience with any other electronic focusers like JMI and the Feather Touch models. I bought a Moonlight a long time ago, and I've been with them ever since. I don't know. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I've gone through four Moonlight focusers, and I've kept 3 of them. So they're really nice focusers. But Moonlight does sell them manual. You can use them manually as well. So Moonlight has them. If you want to just buy a manual Moonlight focuser, you can do that too. But you can also buy the add-ons that you have here in this picture of the motor that you can attach to the focusing knob there, and you can move it in and out using this controller right here. This controller also has a USB port on it that you can attach it to the input of one of your USBs on a computer. And Moonlight has an ASCOM compatible program where you can do precise focusing using your laptop instead of the controller that you see here in the picture. So anyway, but I mean, just to give you an idea of how fine it is. So you see right here, this knob lets you control how fast the motor moves the draw tube in and out. So you turn it all the way this way. I believe it's stopped. It doesn't move at all. But you go all the way this way, it moves about, I think, I would say 1-2 millimeters per second. But yeah, Moonlight, they have their focusing. They have so much experience in telescope focusers that they're able to move the draw tube in micrometers. So just a background on a micrometer. A micrometer, you have a meter stick, you have 1,000 millimeters on that. Well, a micrometer, you can fit 1,000 micrometers into a millimeter. So that just gives you an idea of how fine the focus is on a Moonlight. So I guess another little tidbit of current events, I think about 100 coronavirus particles can fit across a micrometer. I think that's correct, but anyway, yeah, here you go. So anyway, yeah, so very small. Let's see. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the cameras. Okay, so color cameras. Okay, they can get a bit complicated as far as the overall capture of a video, and I'll hit on that a little bit when I go to do a demo of a fire capture program. But what's nice about it is that you just it's pretty straightforward. You just put the camera in, bring everything in focus, make sure you got all the settings that you wish with whatever Planetary capture program that you're going to use at your computer. And that's it. Hit record and you're finished. I mean, or, well, after the recording is finished, of course. But the shortcomings of it is because the what we have here on the camera sensor is what's called a Bayer matrix. Basically, it's what it is the camera is each pixel is covered with either a red, green, or blue filter. Okay, so it's kind of a 1:2 to 1 ratio where you have one red filter or one red pixel per 2 green pixels per 1 blue pixel. So here you have your red, 2 greens, and a blue. Now down here, I found this on Wikipedia actually. This demonstrates really well the shortcoming of a color camera. Okay, so who's to say that? Let's use an example. Like over here, for example, you're looking at Mars. It's the red planet. Okay, well, only a quarter of all of your camera sensor is red pixels. Okay, so you're not going to get much in the way of all the different tones of red that the red planet may display. So, because who knows, like say like a dark area, the red planet right here records a dark feature on the planet, dark red feature on the planet. Well, let's say that over here, that dark feature on the planet is the ice cap, okay, which would be a lighter shade. But you will never see that because it did not fall on that pixel right there, because that pixel is either a green or a blue, all right? So same thing over here with the blue, going a little bit extreme here. Who's to say that on this red pixel where a wavelength of blue coming from the cloud on the planet Mars was trying to get through but was blocked because it fell on a red pixel? It'll never get through. You'll never see the detail of that pixel that's picking up the cloud detail that's usually in blue. So anyway, so that's the shortcomings of a color camera. Otherwise, I still use color cameras all the time, especially with fast rotating planet Jupiter. But mono cameras will always do a better job at capturing accurate color information, all the tones and different wavelengths of light that come from a planet. Okay, so to make that more clear, when you have a mono camera, you have to capture in 3 different colors. I mean, you can, there are ways around this, but I'm not going to get into that. But normally what you want to do is you want to do what a Bayer matrix on a color camera is doing here. You want to have a filter for blue, green, and red, or backwards, we'll say red, green, and blue, or RGB. Talk about it. So the downside of a mono camera is that it's very laborious. Why? Because you have to take a recording of blue, a recording of green, and a recording of red to finally complete the whole visible spectrum of the planet that you're imaging. So over here, very straightforward, just record and away you go. Well, same thing over here, but away you go. You have to do it 3 times in a row, right? So it's laborious. And but what's nice is that because the camera records only 1 wavelength at a time, well, actually that's a shortcoming right there. You need other equipment to move swiftly from filter to filter, because as you can imagine, if you use this camera right here, you put it, you attach a filter to that camera, put it into the telescope, reach focus, get everything all set correctly in your program, and hit record. You got the planet centered, luckily, and then when you remove it, you take out that filter, put that filter on, so you can see where I'm going with this. It just goes, you know, gets out of control. That's where a filter wheel comes in. What you do is you take a filter wheel and you take each of these filters and you can put the different collections of light here. Here you have all the blue wavelengths. You can put one here, here, and here, and here. It's a wheel of, in this case, this is a filter wheel of that can hold up to 5 filters. But usually what you do is you do red, green, and blue. You just rotate through them when you're trying to capture a planet using a mono camera. So you take a recording of red, recording of green, recording of blue, and then later on in the processing program, I'll show you an example of this. I'm not going to do the processing, but show you what each of the filters pick up. You can combine those colors and assign each recording, black and white recording, with the resulting image as red, green, and blue. So, but anyway, here's the part I was going to talk about. But because a mono camera, it's pretty much just this. It's just this camera sensor, and only is filtered with whatever filter you put in front of it. If the sensor that you have in your camera goes beyond the visible, you can probably use an infrared filter. Or you can use, like I was talking about earlier, if you have a Newtonian, you can try to pick up the cloud detail on Venus. As long as the seeing is allowing it, you can pick up the cloud detail using a UV filter. And that's one of the benefits of having a mono camera. You can pick and choose which filters you want to use based on what you're trying to get out of your imaging session, right? So what's one type of filter that I pretty much use more so than red here, you go further up in the longer wavelengths, you get to infrared or near infrared. I prefer to use a near infrared filter, okay? So what's nice about it, it's long wavelengths kind of behave the opposite of the way that short wavelengths behave. If you remember me talking about earlier, short wavelengths tend to bounce off glass really easily, okay? So when you do shorter wavelengths, you want to minimize the amount of glass elements between the camera sensor and the photons that are coming into your telescope. But that's not the case with infrared. Infrared penetrates really well through the different types of glass that you may have in your in between your camera and the photons that are coming in. And what's really nice is that another tidbit about short and long wavelengths as far as our atmosphere goes, the same thing is true. Short wavelengths can get torn up by bad seeing really easily, whereas infrared or longer wavelengths don't have that problem as much. And yeah, they can still get, seeing can still affect them, but if you were to compare going to the shorter end of the spectrum with visible light, if you were to compare a recording of a blue filter versus red, or like I'm talking about, an infrared filter, which is beyond red, to a longer wavelength, it's night and day. And I'll show you an example of that, where the infrared filter data came out a lot better looking than the blue filter. So I'm going through this. So I've gone over scopes, I've gone over focusers, and now I'm going over cameras. I'm about done here with talking about mono. So with that, let me, does anybody have any questions? Feel free to speak up. Okay, also, does anybody have any comments they would like to make? No? Okay, well, I'll move on. So let's see. Okay, so some accessories that beyond the three necessities, right? You definitely need a scope, you definitely need a good focuser to help you focus something so tiny. And obviously you need a camera to make imaging possible. But some of the accessories that would help in your imaging session are like the example I have here is a Barlow. So a Barlow lens, as most of you know, can extend the focal length of your telescope to whatever focal length you're trying to reach, okay? So an example of this factor, this Barlow has a factor of 2. So if I'm using a telescope that has a focal length of 1,000, I'll put this guy in there, it makes a focal length of 2,000. As you know, okay, so a lot of you are already familiar with this concept. So, but I'm just going to go over it anyway. What's really nice too is that Barlows, if you pick up a decent brand Barlow lens, what you can also do is you can put in extension tubes at the end, and the extension tubes that you put in it, further it gets away from the Barlow elements in the Barlow lens, the higher the magnification factor it gets. So say like, for example, if I were to add an inch extension tube that's an inch longer and just stack it on top of this guy and then put my camera in, it'll boost the, and I'm just, again, this is just arbitrary right here, it'll boost the Barlow to 3x, so it extends your focal length even further. What I would highly recommend is that, like I was saying earlier, you want to try to avoid as much glass in your going through your telescope and out to the camera sensor. Try to pick a Barlow and let that be the only Barlow you would use for imaging. Okay, so what I mean by that is that, so say like this Barlow lens has like 3 elements. Well, if I want to get like a 5x Barlow, well, maybe it'll have 4 elements. That's yet another layer of glass the light has to travel through, and another level of contrast that you're going to lose when you're imaging, when you're taking any kind of images, especially with planets. So yeah, it's invaluable. Barlow will help a lot.
Hey, Chris, I have a question about Barlows.
Yeah, what's up?
So I'm in the market for buying one, and I've been talking to some folks, and I have an old school Orion Shorty Fisher-Price kind of Barlow 2X, and I'm looking to get a more interesting one, a better one, if you will. I've had some folks trying to talk me into the TeleVue PowerMate. It's just way expensive, and I'm wondering if I'm just being cheap, or can I find something middle of the road for that to happen? Thank you.
Okay, so I used to have a 3X TeleVue Barlow, and I used it briefly when I had started taking recordings of planets. But then it was a 3X it was a Barlow. It wasn't their PowerMate, but it was their Barlow. Now I'm just going by my experience with the TeleVue brand. It was a 3X Barlow, and it worked well. I mean, I got what I paid for. I could tell I did have a Shorty like you're talking about, David, by Orion. And guess what? Well, I still have the Shorty, and I don't have the 3X TeleVue Barlow anymore. The biggest reason for that is that the 3X Barlow, I don't do much in the way of visual work, you know, looking through the scope. But recently I looked at Mars, of course. You know, it's always a treat to see Mars when we do a flyby at Mars. Yeah, I would say that TeleVue, yeah, I guess the quality is better, but to be honest with you, this image I have here, this is not an image of my Barlow right here, but I'm pretty sure that this is comes from China, and it's been branded for whatever brand this one is. But a popular brand, cheap brand out there is called GSO, and I have this exact Barlow made by GSO Optics, and I've had that Barlow, God, more than 10 years. So yeah, this is a long drawn out answer, but to tell you the truth, if you want to get a PowerMate, go for it.
I'm trying to I think I'd rather spend the money on a better camera. And yeah, since there's a finite amount of money going around here, I'm trying to talk myself into that TeleVue, and I think you answered my question. Go middle of the road.
There's one you get. There it is right there. Sorry. That's the PowerMate, the 2.5 PowerMate, which I've been happy with, but I haven't done a lot of with it yet. So
are you showing it on the chat window, Steve?
What, the picture of it or what?
Well, I'm screen sharing, so I don't know if anybody else sees it.
Oh, if you double click on his thumbnail when he held it up, you can actually see it.
Okay. Well, here, I'll go ahead and take my sharing away.
Oh, no, you can just, yeah, I can see it.
Oh, you can see it? Oh, okay. Right.
Thanks, Steve.
No.
Yeah, so.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, so the thing with the PowerMate, I think the main thing about it is the increase in magnification is the same no matter how far away you put the sensor, if I understand the PowerMate right. versus a Barlow, you have that flexibility of moving it to adjust that magnification factor. So, you know, that could affect someone if they had a setup where they had to put it further away than they wanted. The PowerMate would be useful, but I use a PowerMate. It's just more the quality of the teleview, I think, than it is a PowerMate. So
I actually just got a PowerMate 2-inch 2X, both for doing Planetary, but also because if you're doing wider field, using a Barlow for distant objects, that like you're saying that, or like he was saying, that the light comes in parallel is the idea. So yeah, you don't get that extension if you don't get additional focal length if you add more tube on there. The light is supposed to come in parallel.
right, but yeah, and so but if you're doing Planetary with like a one-shot color, like Zoe camera or something, you know, you can get it up real close to a Barlow without much trouble. But yeah, I would just ask around about what a good quality Barlow is. That's probably a good starting point, and you'll probably get more boost out of a good camera than the differential in the OK Barlow and a Teleview Barlow. Just my gut feeling.
I think, Mike, that's probably the best way for me to go. I think I'm pretty much maxed out what I can do for focal length anyway, but spending the extra money on a camera and learning that for the next couple of years might be a better investment for me. Thank you.
All right, David. Yeah. So there you go. Mike answered a question for you, and I guess that's the downside I would see with the PowerMate. Yeah, just a regular Barlow that you can add extension tubes onto. Seems more attractive, at least from this subject matter. I mean, but yeah, I would definitely like to have a new camera over a PowerMate. So yeah. All right, let's see, what do we have next here? Okay, atmospheric dispersion corrector. Now, I have one of these, and I'll show that to you later. What's interesting about this guy is that, first off, a little background of what kind of problem you can have with imaging planets that an atmospheric dispersion corrector can fix. Now, a lot of you probably have noticed this, even with just regular photography or whatever. You may see that you take a picture of a bright object that's going through a gradient of some sort of gradient that refracts light. You'll notice that there is like here with Saturn, you'll notice that there's a red fringe and a blue fringe, okay? And because of that, what you're seeing here that you need to keep in mind is that part of the color here is in focus, yet another part of the color here is not, or these two areas of the spectrum are not in focus. Okay, so what you can do to get around that, you can go out and take a picture or take a recording of Saturn, you get this, okay? It's like, oh, okay, well, there's Saturn, but I wish it didn't have these fringes on it. So Photoshop, at least I know Photoshop, and I could not see why PixInsight would not have something like this. Registax, and I do believe AutoStacker does too, allows you to move the red channel, which is causing this fringing right here, towards the center. So, oops. So it moves the the red part of the spectrum down to the middle, and the same thing, it'll do the same thing with the blue and move it in, and then this is what you get. Well, the downside of it is that, you've merged all the colors, and yeah, it looks better. But if you look between these two images, you'll see that it's still kind of fuzzy. Well, the reason why that is going back to what I was saying earlier. You only have some of the wavelengths in focus here. Well, and the one part that you don't have in focus is some of this red and some of this blue. Okay, so what do? How can you get everything in focus so that you get a nice color image where all the wavelengths are coming in nice and in focus and whatnot? But you can use this little thing called atmospheric dispersion corrector. And the way it does that is that it uses a set of prisms where it takes the the wavelengths of light and merges them into down into one plane, focal plane, because the focal plane of the red here and the focal plane of the blue here is either further or is either further away from the collective field of view, or excuse me, focal plane, which you would get if you were able to do this. So the prisms direct all that light into one focal plane. So then all you have to do is focus. You don't have to necessarily focus on one color versus the other. Okay, that's the best way I'm trying to describe it. Everything should be in focus if you've tuned your atmospheric dispersion corrector. Now, when you heard me say the word tune, now the way an atmospheric dispersion corrector works is that obviously when you're taking an image of a planet that's closer to the horizon, you'll see that this fringing of out of focus light is more extreme. So the closer to it is to the horizon, the more of this refracting you're going to get, or atmospheric refracting you're going to get. Now above you, it's not as bad, okay? Or well, at least at zenith, it technically, for all intents and purposes of the discussion, it shouldn't be there at all. But anyway, atmospheric dispersion corrector has to be tuned based on the altitude of the object that you're imaging. So if you were to like take an image of Venus when it's at inferior conjunction, where it's nearly between us and the sun, and it's going to be a nice thin sliver of a crescent. Well, because it's closer to the sun, it's like if it's an evening star in that case, when the sun goes down, it's going to be very low on the horizon. So this fringing is going to be a lot worse than versus if you were to look at it when it's straight above you. So these prisms, you have to adjust them according to altitude. So that can take a bit of a learning curve to get used to. So anyway, that's what an atmospheric dispersion corrector does. So and I have one. I use it, and I used it was it a week ago when I took a set of images or a set of recordings for Mars. So let's see what we got here. Okay, one more thing. It says there, the first bullet says for color cameras mostly. I've seen where people, what they'll do is that they'll use the atmospheric dispersion corrector with mono cameras, and I don't know. I'm not thoroughly convinced that it makes a huge difference. I've seen before and after results of using an atmospheric dispersion corrector with a mono camera, and it does seem to give you a more crisp image. I don't know the exact thought process of how it works. Mike Fulbright, can you fill us in on that? I don't really understand that concept. Do you know what that's all about?
I guess the RGB band passes are wide enough that you have differential refraction across them, so you could still, within the R filter, you could still pull things together, and within the G and within the blue, I guess. Right?
Yeah.
Because
Okay,
blue can go from 4,000 to what, 4,800 or something. So, there's some, but you'd have to have amazing seeing, I would think, to even notice.
Yeah. So again, that's one of the killjoys of this discussion here, is that the seeing here in North Carolina is pretty brutal. So, but it's always, I still go out and image planets. Like I said, Mars made Mars opposition, I believe it was earlier this week, or not today or whatever. But yeah, that's what I did. Is I've been looking at Mars quite a bit, so that's got me a little bit excited. I haven't gone out and image planets in a while. So anyway, yeah, I see what you're saying, Mike. It's like, if you have if you're using a filter for like red, a red filter, you're going to have a range of, red wavelengths. So some of it may be out of focus. Maybe an atmospheric dispersion corrector will fix that. I believe, did I get that right, Mike? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, because obviously, when you use a one-shot color, you're going from, like, say, 4,000 to 7,000 almost. that obviously is where you see the problem. But within each of those filters that compose RGB, I guess you could, especially if you're imaging it as low as Jupiter is, where for us, perhaps that's what they're doing.
Okay. All right. Okay, let's see. So some quick tips. Okay, so before I get to collimation, one thing I just want to emphasize quite a bit is because you see right here on the slide, because plants are so tiny, you need a lot of focal length to magnify them. That means all the little adjustments to make your scope perform at its best for any kind of imaging or just visual use, it becomes absolutely critical when you're extending the focal length as far out as 1,000, way beyond 1,000 millimeters, which most people do for imaging planets. So yeah, so focusing is going to be difficult, and I'll tell you, give you an example of where focusing will just be impossible, and an adjustment you'll just have to make in that case. But the other thing too is, like I was talking about, the best scopes, most common scopes used are Newtonian reflectors and Schmidt-Cassegrains, and so you want to collimate those. And those who don't know what collimation is that the mirrors where the light is coming in, bouncing off the big primary mirror and hitting a secondary that's smaller. You need to make sure they're aligned correctly, and the act of aligning your optics, that's called collimation. Okay. So you need to make sure they're nice and square on each other. Something that I just tried just out of curiosity when I was learning what collimation was, is this one guy, he had said, this was when I was using a Dob, not too different from the Dob you have now, Steve Christensen, but it was a 10-inch Dob. They said that if your collimation isn't perfect, it could mean seeing not seeing the gap like you would see here in the rings of Saturn, to actually seeing it if your collimation is perfect. So again, when you start to magnify this much or extend your focal length this much, focusing becomes super critical, and so does collimation. So you've got to get those nailed down. And what I do when I go out, I check the collimation every imaging session. Now, if I'm doing something at very short focal, well, not very short focal length, but using a reducer for my Schmidt-Cassegrain, I may or may not check the collimation, because if I had been using it mostly for planets, that means the collimation was pretty damn close in the first place. So anyway, so but to me, the best way to collimate is using an out-of-focus star. So, and because your mirror can shift as the night goes on, so you can picture the big giant mirror in a Newtonian or a Schmidt-Cassegrain as being in a cradle. Okay, so as with it being fastened in that cradle, as your scope moves throughout the night, following whatever object you have in the sky, or whether you're slewing to another object, as you can imagine, the mirror is going to move a little bit. Okay, so the mirror, when it moves like that throughout the night, that's called mirror flop. All right, and the act of the mirror flop causes the image to either get out of focus, or the collimation will just be off just a tad. And so when mirror flop occurs, you get the other term, which is called image shift. All right, and that's basically where just something about the path of the light is getting moved off centered. So when you go to collimate on a star, you want to try to get as close to zenith as possible, zenith being straight above you. That will ensure that whatever mirror flop or whatever slewing that you're going to do throughout the night at different altitudes of whatever objects that you're going to be imaging, the mirror flop is going to be at a minimum. So, I mean, you could always just collimate that to a star that's close by to the object that you're imaging. But if you're going to look at more than one object throughout the night, that's can get pretty tedious. So, Yeah, so basically you can use collimation tools like a laser collimator or an auto collimator or a, I can't remember the name of it. It's the collimator that has the little 2 wire crosshairs in it that you can use to collimate your optics by eye. But anyway, to me, nothing will ever top using a star. So yeah, look at a star at near zenith and make sure that donut of out of focus star is nice and well, concentric. Let's see. Okay, so this is what I was talking about earlier as far as you need your focusing to be absolutely perfect, but what you will find is that on some nights where seeing is just really bad, if you try to image a planet and you're focusing on it and it looks like your focusing is pretty good, but you're just not sure because the seeing is so bad, okay? And it looks like the planet is still out of focus, but who knows? It may be the seeing that that's making the planet seem like it's still out of focus. Okay, so if your planet is in focus but seeing is bad, what I would recommend doing, or what is recommended doing, not me. I mean, this is common knowledge for people who do any kind of imaging. You want to scale back your focal length. Okay, because if you're having a hard time focusing at a long focal length, then that is what's termed as oversampling. Okay, which means that you're trying to come in, bring an object into focus, and it's just so impossible to do it because your camera just cannot give you a good looking focus of the object. All right, so what you can do is you can like cut back on the focal length by either removing a Barlow, or I don't know why you would do this in planetary imaging, putting in a reducer. But if you like back off on the focal length, well, obviously it's going to be easier to focus because you're no longer magnifying the scene. You're magnifying less scene and more of the object that you're trying to image. So does everybody understand that? I hope everybody understands. Does anybody else have any input on that? No? Okay. Right, so I'll move on here. Again, going back to focusing. So it's a good idea to refocus between your each recording, in my opinion. So who knows that your focus may have been a little off in one recording, and then the next one, it's like razor sharp, or seems like it's closer. I would say razor sharp, because if it was off and razor sharp, you probably would know the difference. But yeah, that's always a good idea, because who knows, you go through all your recordings and you never did refocus, did a refocus of the camera, refocus the camera. Who knows if you could have gotten a better focus between the different recordings. Okay, so in the case of a mono camera, each filter, as we talked about with the ADC, each wavelength of light can be refracted to a small extent. So some advertisers will list that their filters are parfocal with each other. Parfocal meaning that if you can reach focus with one, it'll stay in focus for all the rest. Yeah, I'm not a big subscriber to that. No matter what they say, there's always going to be a little bit of focusing that's going to be required between each wavelength or set of wavelengths in the term of RGB. So red, green, and blue filters. So always refocus when you're going through different filters during an imaging run. So anyway, okay. So
can I offer a thought
sure.
on that? Okay. Well, when I was doing my Mars, I noticed the thing to remember is, like I was shooting at f/25, and you know, when you're imaging planetary, you're usually at f/15 or longer, and not to get in too far, but your critical focus zone starts to get pretty big. So even if they're not parfocal, you're at such a long focal ratio, you can kind of get away maybe without having to be that worried about it. Of course, it depends on your setup, but that's what I found, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's kind of goes about with if you I wouldn't talk about focal length for, maybe you already said this, but not focal length, but focal ratio. You know, like for example, if you're using a camera lens to take a picture of a nebula and it's set to f2, obviously stopping it down to f4 makes it easier to reach focus. So I think that's what you're getting at, right, Mike?
Yeah, if anyone's familiar with photography, we talk about depth of field, which is sort of related to this. But, and the other thing is, if you're doing LRGB, I would focus on L really well and then not even worry about RGB, because your L is, or your infrared, if you use infrared for L, is going to give you all the details. So just focus your luminance filter extremely well and then just blow through RGB and don't even worry about focus. Because like in normal or LRGB imaging, you don't care about RGB being at the same level of detail, because we're going to pull all that detail from the luminance. That's all I wanted to add.
Well, that's the same reason why you would also, for most of us who may be familiar with the old kind of CCD imaging, well, I'm sure maybe people do this with CMOS colors too. That's why you bend the colors and not really worry about the loss of resolution, right?
Yeah, yeah. With the old CCD with really high read noise, you bend to overcome read noise, basically. Yeah, CMOS has such low read noise, it's not necessary, but the idea is the same, exactly.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Mike.
Mike, this is Don Duhart. What's the difference between a luminance filter and UV IR cut filter?
I don't know that there is, but obviously the UV IR is telling you what it does. It cuts on both ends. I guess some people over time, there used to be clear filters that people would mistakenly get thinking it was a luminance filter. And it was literally, I think, just a piece of glass, you know, to try to keep things parfocal, I guess. But I wouldn't buy a filter if you can't find a good bandpass. You know what I'm talking about, a graph showing you what wavelengths it passes, just to confirm that. And all the Beters and Astronomic and all those will have those charts. So, but it could just be terminology. Don, I don't know if there's much difference. I always look at the charts.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, so a little bit of lingo. When it comes to actually going out and taking a recording of a planet, there's some things that you need to keep track of. And in this case, when it comes to the file format or the video that you're going to do your planet recording, you need to make sure that you have the correct bit depth. Okay, so if you look at this diagram, or this picture right here, it's not completely accurate, but it pretty much displays what the concept of what I'm trying to get across. 16 bits bit depth has way more shades of detection, or will display more different shades than an image or recording that was taken in an 8-bit format. Because 8-bit takes, there's only 256 shades in an 8-bit format, whereas 16-bit, God, I want to say it's 60,000. I should have been prepped for that. What is it, Mike? Do you know?
65535.
Okay, so I got close. 60, a little more than 60. Between 60 and 70. There you go. Okay, so anyway, yeah. So you can see that if you have this kind of phenomenon occurring on in an image, it doesn't matter what kind of image it can be, just from your point and shoot camera or whatever. If you're trying to get a nice clean image that represents all the different shades that were coming from the object you were imaging, 16-bit format would give you the most accurate representation of what was going on when you were looking at this object. Okay, whereas 8-bit, not so much. Now, because there are more shades here, the file format of the recording obviously will be huge compared to an 8-bit, right? So one of the most popular file extensions that are out there for recording planetary image, planetary recordings it's called the SER file. I don't know what the SER stands for, but the extension, the SER extension is almost always a 16-bit format. And so that's probably the most popular file format I've seen these days in planetary imaging. When you want to take a recording of a planet and process an image out of it, it's usually an SER file. Some SER file, some people, when they take recordings of the planets, they'll record for several minutes. I've seen one person record take a recording of Venus for 15 minutes. And I'm just like, wow, that has got to be a lot of frames, because we'll talk about frame rate, but that's a really long recording. And these recordings, they can get to up to several gigabytes in size. So that's one of the caveats of planetary imaging. You better have a good hefty amount of hard disk space if you want to analyze everything that you have captured and, or, you know, want to store later on a cloud, whatever cloud account that you have. But anyway, yeah, so you always want to capture your images in an uncompressed format as well. So, because I'm not a computer person, but all I know is that when you compress your videos, you tend to lose some of the information when you go to process it. So Mike, can you fill us in on that a little bit?
Yeah, I would agree. You know, I wouldn't save it as an MPEG-4 or some other format. I would use, but I mean, SharpCap, I don't even know if you can choose the codec. Can you choose, or does it just pick something for you?
I know,
You have options. You can do AVIs as well.
But can you actually change the codec that it's encoding video? I think it's always raw, uncompressed. Well, I don't get into it, but anyway, yeah, I think SharpCap just writes out a uncompressed file like you're talking about. Kind of like when you take DSO images, you don't want to write out compressed JPEGs. You want to write out raw native images that preserve everything.
Okay. All right, so 16-bit format, yeah, we went over that. So let's see, what do we have here? Okay, Lingo. So
I had a question on that, actually.
what's that?
So with what I'd been reading in preparation to do the planetary stuff the past few weeks that I've been doing, sort of the consensus I actually saw was to record an 8-bit because you could do higher frame rate, and those additional bits are actually just mainly noise, and you're just adding noise to your image rather than data.
Okay, I don't know if I fully understand why that's the case, but what you say is true as far as the file size. Yeah, it can't. Your frame rate will be. You'll be able to have a faster frame rate because, well, like I said, 8-bit images. There's not as much color depth with it. So, or shade depth, I guess that's a better way of saying it. Because you're not recording as many shades as you would in 16-bit, yeah, obviously it's going to be easier for the camera and computer to take a recording easier. It's going to be easier to take that recording. And because of that, the computer is like, oh, well, you know, if I were doing this in 16-bit, I could do only 20 frames per second. But this person wants to do an 8-bit, so I'll do 100 frames per second. So, because 8-bit's so much easier to record because there's not as many shades to actually record.
Yeah, I mean, I've been using fire capture and the, you know, the area of interest focus. So I'm, you know, only shooting like 320 by 320 with my ASI 120 cam.
Yeah,
and that's turning out pretty good frame rate and doesn't kill the entire hard drive in one recording.
Yeah,
I would agree. You know, the thing to remember is the same thing's true with these CMOS cameras that have 12-bit readout for DSOs. People kind of get all bent out of shape over that. But when and I could find a link, the fellow that wrote PhD, name's escaping me right now, has a nice talk about how if you stack hundreds of images, you start to recover bit depth. because you're averaging all these images, so you're coming up with a better estimate of the actual value of those pixels. So in the case of Planetary, where you may be stacking 500 or 1,000 images, you do tend to recover some of that back. And so 8-bit isn't quite as big a penalty as if you tried to image DSOs in 8-bit, you wouldn't get anything because the dynamic range is so large. So I would experiment with both, but I think you're right. Getting more frames in the time that you're allowed that the planet is rotating, you don't have a lot of time to just sit there and dawdle. You might find it does help.
Okay, I see what you're saying. That makes sense. All right, so probably the biggest things that you would see in a planetary imaging program is setting your exposure and gain. So what gain does is it increases, roughly speaking, increases the sensitivity of the camera so that it can also, so that it can collect light, quote, more efficiently. Now I say quote efficiently because every camera has its own inherent read noise behind it. And when you boost gain, you're boosting every characteristic of that camera sensor, which includes the noise. So you'll notice that your object, as you increase the gain, your object gets brighter, it gets easier to see, and you can probably, we'll get to exposure later, you can lower your exposure some because your gain has made the object so much brighter. But you'll also notice that there's a lot of graininess mixed in with it. And sort of going on to what Lauren Schultz, right, was referring to earlier. You'll get a lot of graininess, but you can also get rid of that by taking a lot of frames, because that graininess usually is not on the same pixel in every single frame of your recording. So if you stack enough of those frames from that video, you're going to run across some that do not have that graininess on one pixel, and then you go to the other, and that same pixel has actual signal and not the graininess of the noise from that camera sensor. So next, you get to exposure. So basically, that's just the amount of time that goes by that you're collecting light from whatever object you're photographing, right? So the longer your exposure, well, obviously, the more light you're going to collect and the brighter the object will be in your images, or in this case, your recording. But the downside of it, as you can imagine, just like any kind of long exposure, the chances of the image getting smeared, whether it be by just bad tracking, wind blowing on it, or God forbid, the bad seeing, will smear the image if the exposure is too long, okay? Because there could have been a split, let's say like you're doing, oh, I don't know, 1/10 of a second. That's absurdly long for an exposure when doing planetary imaging. But for this example, say you're doing 1/10 of an exposure. Well, let's say that you saw that scene snap, the scene just for a very, very brief amount of time was excellent. Well, if it was a very brief amount of time and it was shorter than 1/10 of a second, well, you never did pick up that, you never were able to take advantage of that nice short period of good seeing. So in that case, you would want your exposure to be shorter. So say like you do an exposure that's 10 times less. So you went from 1/10 to 1/100th of a second, and then your odds are greater when you can capture, that you'll be able to capture frames where the atmosphere is still and the planet is nice and crisp. So yeah, take care in adjusting both of these. Gain, you don't want to get gain too much noise from having too high of a gain. And your exposure, well, you want to keep it short enough so that you can, one, collect more frames and collect frames from those instances where the frame or the planet was nice and sharp. Okay, I guess this will be the last bit of lingo. I think this is all I have in here. So One thing that you need to pay attention to in all imaging is how much spread do you have on the light, different shades of light going across what we call the imaging histogram. Okay, so if you have a, if you jack up your gain, and you'll see this better in the fire capture demo I'll give you, but if you up the gain or up the exposure, well, some areas that were already bright will become so intense that it will drown out the lighter shades that were there. And because of that, data is lost. So if you were to say, like, if you have Mars and you make it super duper bright, well, it may no longer look like a red planet. It may look like a yellowish orange planet, okay, because you've drowned out everything in the by upping your exposure or your gain. And the histogram will show you that, and that the histogram graph will show that there is a signal going all the way across the board of your histogram. And it's kind of hard to describe, and you'll see what I'm talking about later. But these two pictures right here of the planet Uranus, what I had to do when you have to up your exposure to get things that are not so bright to show up, well, like what happened here is the actual planet of Uranus was really bright. So Uranus was really bright, but the moons that I wanted to get to show up showed up nicely. I mean, they're still dim, but they showed up a lot better. So what you can do, and you probably connect the dots here, is you can extend it raise the exposure and the gain, and just bleach out the signal of the planet. Your planet won't look nice in the recording, but you'll be able to eke out the moons that are very, very dim and hard to see, okay, or hard to capture. So you can take one recording of the planet Uranus, and you'll be able to get the moons to show up. And then when you lower the exposure, you can do another one where you're just showing the actual planet itself. And then what you can do is you can use a little bit of Photoshop magic and basically copy and paste the moons here in with your regular image of the planet. So Uranus is my favorite planet, just so everybody knows. I'll say that over and over again. Such a cool planet. Terrible name, but hey, what are you going to do? Okay, so when you're taking images using a color camera, so it's like I said that every other filter has a different, or every other pixel on the camera sensor of a color camera has a different color filter. It has either a red, a green, or blue, or in the case of green, you remember seeing that diagram, there's two greens for every red and blue pixel. You have your camera has a way of merging all that data together. So let's say that in an area on, I don't know, let's see, like Jupiter. Jupiter has a nice depth of different kinds of colors. It has reds. It also has very faint blues. It has grays. It has yellows, oranges, and, all those kind of colors that you can see there. Now, one of the downsides, going back to what we were talking about earlier of color cameras, is that a color camera has to, when you debayer the data coming from a color camera, what debayering is it tries to estimate what is going on in an area of the color recording. So if you have an area that looks predominantly green, but there's very little red and very little blue there, what will happen is that it'll average those values of those three colors together. But since it's mostly green signal that's in that area, you're going to come up with a shade that's more on the green side. Now, let's say, like, for example, those who know about merging colors together, let's say you're looking at a feature that's mostly green, but also has a bit of blue in it, but absolutely no red. Well, what the pixels will, what debarring will do is it'll take, again, average all those values, what the red is seeing, what the green is seeing, what the blue is seeing. And like I said, in this example, there's nothing in the red, little bit of blue, but a lot of green. What do you get? Well, obviously you get blue-green, or as we know here in imaging circles, cyan. So you'll see that there's different ways of debarring where you can average a red pixel, 2 greens and a blue, or you can do a red, or excuse me, a green, a blue, a red, and then another green together. So there's ways you can average these, those 2 red or 2 greens and 1 blue, 1 red together in whatever debarring format that you choose. The one that I'm most familiar with that goes along with it's kind of an analogy of what I'm describing here is called nearest neighbor, okay? So the way that works is that you look at a pixel, look at its value, and then you look at the pixels surrounding it, and you look at the values of those pixels and say, oh, well, this this pixel that I'm standing on is green, and green's really high, but over there I see there's a lot of blue over there, so I'm going to average those values together. Nearest neighbor, I think that's it's a debarring algorithm. Anyway, let's see what do we have next here. Okay, so some extras that you can do, taking your imaging captures to another level. You can do time lapses, and obviously, well, you're going to have to pause in between images to capture the wavelengths of different filters, because that's what you need to do with the mono camera. There's no color there except for what filter you put in front of it. So you'll need to take a recording for red, you'll need to take a recording for green, you'll need to take a recording for blue. Now, what's nice about some, I don't know exactly how it works in SharpCap, I haven't explored it, but the one program that I'll show you that I have most experience in, or experience with, is Fire Capture. And what you can do with Fire Capture is you can use a motorized filter wheel instead of one that you move by hand like I showed you earlier. You can move between the filters, and take your recordings. Now, what you can do with Fire Capture is you can take a recording of red, and then the program will pause for you, move it over to green, and to allow you to refocus or whatever, and then bam, it starts taking the green. Then it pauses again, and same thing happens all over again. With blue, the filter wheel gets moved to blue, and then you refocus for the blue wavelengths, and then you can take another imaging sequence of the blue, and then there you go. You have a red sequence, a green sequence, and a blue sequence all combined in one. So, and then you just combine them later in whatever processing program that you're going to use. So anyway, and now acquisition. It says Fire Capture demo, but I think what I'm going to do first, and just bear with me, I'm going to show you my imaging setup that I have set up in this room here on my phone. So I did this earlier, and it was able, but I only did it once, so let's see if I can get it to work. So I'm going to stop my share, and I'm going to go over to Chris's phone, which you may see among all the people there. So I guess you can talk amongst yourselves when I get this ready.
How many of you guys taken Mars images in the last month? Warren, anyone else? Yeah, I took some, I guess last week. It turned out all right. I do it every time Mars is closest to Earth, I'll do it. So I guess I take planetary images every 2 years. And Chris, yeah. What are y'all using to process?
I'm using AutoStacker.
Okay.
And then Topaz after that for cleanup.
Yeah. AutoStacker is good. I've been using this Astro Surface. I've been kind of pleased with it. It's a little simpler, but it seems.
I saw someone mention that the other day. What has it got over AutoStacker? I haven't dug into it yet.
I've used both. I felt like one thing it has is it has a wavelet sharpening built into it.
Okay.
So it's kind
Instead
of
of having to use Registax as well.
yeah, or Pix Insight. And I found it does not have the clearest UI, but there are some tutorials that you know, and I'd be happy to do a demo sometime, but
Which is that?
Astro Surface.
Oh,
Yeah, I can find a link. I'll put it in the chat in a second.
that'd be cool.
It
Yeah, I was literally just looking at it. I think I still have the tab open here. Yeah, here it is.
this is very qualitative, but I processed it with both very quickly. I didn't spend a lot of time on it, and I felt like I got the sharpening to do what I wanted. I don't know if y'all are familiar with onion ringing. It's when you sharpen too much, you start getting these weird artifacts on the limb.
Mm.
It's like you kind of have the limb, and then it gets dark and then bright. And there's some filtering options that AstroSurface had when you're doing the wavelets that if you play with long enough, you can kind of smear that out a little without losing detail in the center of the image. It's hard to describe, but I could show it. But I would use both. I mean, they're both free, and there's great info on using both of them. But I got to a final image much quicker having it all in one program.
Okay, folks, are you ready?
Yep.
All right, I had to get a drink of water there for a second. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Okay, so this is coming from a phone, so obviously it's going to be delayed a little bit, but first I just want to show you this. This is what I have right here. This is an atmospheric dispersion corrector, okay? And so right here is the camera that's attached to it. This is ASI-224. This is probably one of the best color cameras to come along in a while, at least in my opinion. And excuse me. And I'd almost wish that whoever manufactured this sensor, that they would have made a mono of it, because my God, the sensor in this thing is just so magnificent for planet imaging. And had they done a mono, I think it would have been, I wouldn't say revolutionary, but it would have definitely been a bestseller. So, but anyway, so this is the atmospheric dispersion corrector, and if you look right here, what I have are these two levers. Now, these two levers, what they do is they turn the prisms that are in it to move the red and the blue that may be out of focus into the focal plane of all wavelengths. That's how that works, okay? So again, what you want to do, I mean, they are also crisscrossed. What you want to do is that you want to point this at the object, and you just adjust these right here, okay? Now, there's another aspect to using the atmospheric dispersion corrector. You may see this, just like I paused there for a second, but if you look there, you'll see a knob right there in the middle. Okay, now it's back. This knob right here will determine exactly where your atmospheric dispersion corrector needs to be aligned onto the horizon. So in this case, wherever my telescope is pointing, this knob has to be, let me put it this way, there we go. This knob has to be parallel with the horizon. So if my telescope starts moving in a direction where the knob is going to be like either pointing down or pointing up, I have to point it so that it's parallel with the horizon. Because if I don't do that, those wavelengths, they start to move out of focus. So let's see.
They've actually updated the design on it with a really nice feature. You can, it comes with a bubble level on it now, so that you can tell for sure that that ring is horizontal.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. I mean, is that on the ZO model? Is that what that is?
What's that?
Is that on the ZWO model, like this one right here?
Yeah, yeah. I've got the brand new version of that came out this year, I think.
Okay. All right, so that's just headphones right there. So here's my mono camera right here, and here's that filter wheel that you saw pictured. So yeah, I have a manual one. I usually, when I go out doing color, or excuse me, taking mono images, I usually am just out there to do an imaging sequence. And I'm not out there to like do a time lapse or spend a very long time out there. But anyway, see this thing foggy and so anyway, what you're seeing there, where my finger is right now, that is how you turn the filter wheel. So God, I wish this thing would work better. Let's see. Oops, my fingers just keep on touching this thing. Anyway, so yeah, you can see how I can switch through different filters. Right now, the filter set I have on here for this mono camera, this filter wheel, number one is actually infrared filter. Because if you remember what I was saying, an infrared filter, the wavelength of infrared is less affected by atmospheric seeing. So you'll get a nice crisp. You'll get a nice crisp image. Well, I wouldn't say no matter how bad the seeing is, but out of all three filters, an infrared filter will probably give you the best image. So, so that's number one is my infrared filter. Number two, and I use that, let me back up, that one, the infrared filter, that replaces my red, okay, the infrared filter. So I use that as my red filter. Like Mike was saying, that you can use it sort of as an L filter or a luminance filter in this case, so that you can, because it's always nice and crisp, you can set it so that when you combine all your reds, greens, and blues together, you can set the your luminance channel, which was taken with an infrared filter, lay it over top of it, and then like Photoshop, set it as a luminance layer, and the whole planet, including all the colors, will look nice and sharp. So number two is my green, and then last but not least, blue. Okay, so as you can see, this could get kind of tedious. Okay, so while I'm doing this and putting my fingers on here, as you can imagine, the planet's shaking all over the place. So I have to wait for it to stop. Then also, because I'm going to different filters, I'm going to have to refocus each time I move to a different filter. And then finally, I go over and start recording. Now, if I were to take a time lapse of a what do you call it? Of a RGB sequence and do one repetitively, that would just drive me nuts. And the only way that I could actually make that work is if I get a motorized filter, not a manual one like this one. And also how I would have to set my focuser so that it would refocus. It would have presets for each filter where the focal point for each filter would be. So anyway, that's a filter wheel. This is my mono camera, ASI 290. It's been out for a while. Mike, I believe there's a larger sensor version of the 290. Do you know what that is, or does anybody?
I didn't quite hear the last part. There's a what sensor?
Yeah, the ASI 290. Does it have? Is there like another sensor in that family that's like bigger?
Well, no, but you know, they have that ASI 462 now, which if you go to ASI's website, they kind of push over the 290 as the replacement. It's not bigger, but it's better somehow. So that's the only other one I know similar.
Okay, all right. Well, anyway, so okay, so your atmosphere corrector and my color imager. So these are basically the two setups that I use when I go out and image planets. So filter wheel, and then atmospheric corrector, dispersion corrector for the color camera. So now we'll go up to the scope and let's talk about the three essentials. We will look at nice large scope. So here's my C11. Okay, so take this lens cap off. So C11, obviously, many of us have already seen it. It's got a really nice, huge mirror that's 11 inches in diameter, or 280 millimeters in diameter. Okay, so unlike the Newtonian, you only have to collimate it using these screws right here. So whereas in Newtonian, you not only have to collimate the secondary, like the Schmidt-Casper in here, but you also have to collimate the primary mirror back there. Okay, so it's not as hard as it sounds. Okay, I mean, but if you're all about, I want to keep it so easy. Well, I mean, I guess that's why I start with Schmidt-Casper, But if I were to ever get a permanent observatory, I probably would get a Newtonian, and but I don't see that happening anytime soon. So anyway, so that's my Schmidt-Casper. So back here is the business end, and so there's here's that focuser that you saw in the presentation. It's made by Moonlight, and right in here is my Barlow lens that I usually just keep it attached to the scope at all times because I'll only use the scope for visual planetary. I don't know if I'll ever use it for deep sky. God, man, I wonder what that would be like. But anyway, yeah, so here's looking out front. So anyway, but in the Barlow that I just took out is in here. Now, that Barlow that you saw in the presentation, again, I was saying that it was similar to this, but Dave, you were talking about, I don't know how much this one is, but what's nice about this Barlow that I have is that it looked like the one that you saw in the video, or excuse me, in the presentation. What it allows you to do is you can actually screw off the elements from that thing, and you can put it on, say, like a shorter extension tube. So yeah, it's made by GSO Optics, and I've had this thing, like I said, pretty close to when I started in the hobby. So anyway, it's kind of awkward using my phone, but I don't have another camera. Thanks for bearing with me. So yeah, and then down here, this is the controller that I use to attach to the stepper motor here. So let me go ahead and do that. Let's just do that for fun. So next one is, yeah, I think that's RS-232 cable. So I'll connect it on the bottom here and make sure I got it on that. Okay, so I'm in there. Pushed a little too hard there. Okay. All right. And down here, I have a battery attached to it. So put it in right here. Okay, so I'm attached to it right now, and you look on the back of this. There's that that USB port where you can attach the focuser, electronic focuser, to your camera, or to your computer rather, and control it from your computer. And you can control it so much easier from your computer. And if you want to like do this out. Set this up outside and connect to it wirelessly inside. That can come in pretty handy. But otherwise, this is what I always do. I just use it right here. So again, this sets the speed. So 0 or all the way down to here, it doesn't move at all. So if you move it all the way up, see if you can see this. There's the draw tube. So you can see how it's going back in very slowly into the draw tubes going back into the scope. Okay, so this gives you a good example of how nice and fine an electronic focuser can move or can help in planetary imaging. I mean, or let me just say in kind imaging. We all know that. So, so anyway, let's see. Oops. Anyway, so those are pretty much all the toys I had to show you. But there's the knob where if you don't have an aftermarket focuser and you just have this to use, like I said, you can attach, a potato chip clip to this thing and just move it very gradually. I'm going to show you one of my old Jupiter time lapses that I did a long time ago, and I didn't have an electronic focuser. I didn't have well, I didn't have the electronic focuser. I had to totally rely on this guy right here. Okay. All right. So yeah, that's the setup I use for Planetary. But let's see. I think that's it. That's all I have to show. Okay. Anyway, any questions? No? Okay. But anyway, that Barlow that I just showed you, Dave, it's like, I'll show you the results I got with it. I don't know what you're going to use that Barlow for, other than just Planetary, but if you're just doing Planetary with whatever Barlow that you're using there, let's see, let me get out of this. Okay, so if you're going to do any kind of Planetary, that Barlow that I was talking about, that 2X GSO, I mean, it works wonders. I've never had a problem with it. So let's see. All right, so I'm going to do a quick demo, sort of quick, I guess. Demo of fire capture. Let's see. And connecting my color camera right here. Let's see. Connected. Okay, there's the chime. The computer says I'm connected. Now let's see if this will work. Let me just go ahead and close the presentation. Fire capture. So, la 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 la. Wow, I just saw the grass grow really high just now. Let's see. Okay, so I'll share my screen. We'll do that one. Share. Okay, so can everybody see this? So, all right, so the what I have connected right now is that color camera that you saw with the atmospheric dispersion corrector on it. And it's a color camera, but you may be seeing this that's like, well, why is it in black and white? So what's happening right now is, like I said, the camera is just basically just giving you a feed of what it's seeing right now, but it's not debayering any of the information that's coming in. So this is fire capture right here, and if I were to, let's see, make sure I get this right. Yeah, down here, there he is. If I were to debayer this information, you can already see that's my lamp right there. So it has an incandescent light in it. So actually, no, it's a LED light, a warm LED. So it comes out as being on the yellow side there. So if we were to, what you can do with fire capture here is if you look right here, this is the object we're taking we're going to be taking an image of, per se. It's Saturn, right? And fire capture allows you to, it's very customizable. So it may take a bit of a learning curve, but you'll be, at least in my opinion, you'll be happy with what it can, what exactly it can do, because it's purely made for planetary imaging. Whereas SharpCap, it can do this too, but it's, in my opinion, it's more geared towards deep sky or EAA, electronic assisted astronomy. Right here, this is the object we'll be taking a picture of, and what I can do in this program is I can have all the settings set up for each one of the filters. Now, obviously, for this, for our purposes, we're going to be using the RGB filter. I wouldn't really call it a filter, but when you're choosing these filters, each filter has a setting applied to it. So, for example, for red, green, blue, these are the settings that have been applied to it. Okay, so now. Up here are those two controls that I was talking about. You have gain and you have exposure, okay? Or I did it backwards, but gain and exposure, okay? So the gain is is up quite a bit. Now, if I turn down the gain, you'll notice that the image does get darker, but at least on my screen, I can tell that it's less green, okay? So let's see, I don't know, let's turn it down way far. And if I up the exposure, because we lost a signal from the camera, you can see that the image is a little cleaner, okay? So anyway, so when you up the exposure though, it gets really bright, and some parts of it that you're already seeing now are kind of blown out in the middle. Now, if I face completely at light bulb, we'll see that it's very blown out. Now, the other aspect we were talking about that you need to keep an eye on is the histogram. So down here is the histogram, and you want all these, the signal is off the charts right here, okay? So, which means that the histogram has been pushed 100% all the way to the brightest signals that are on the right here. Now, if I make it darker, they start to drift to the right. Okay, you see that? So if my exposure is set to bright, like it is here, I'm going to lose all this information that's like way over here that would otherwise show up had I toned down the exposure a little bit. So right here, I'm looking at something very bright, so I'm going to need to tone down. I'm going to need to bring down the exposure. So there you go. So as you can see, those peaks are moving back to where you can get a better look at the dynamic, all the shades that the camera can pick up. So down here, I have the file format I want to capture, which is SCR or SAR, and what I would do is I would choose where my planet is. Let's say that it's only like in this area. What I can do is that I can select that area. So like Mars is just like right here. Actually here, let's look at this first. Let's look at status. Okay, so down here, you'll see the frames per second. You'll see it's pretty low. Okay, but if I just capture a small area, let's say because planets are tiny and it's definitely not going to cover the whole chip, I'll say that, okay, my planet's right here. Let's just focus on this area. It says set new image size to 300, basically 300 by 300. And I'll say, okay. And that turns into my region of interest. Now, it went from like less than 20 frames per second up to between 100, almost getting close to 200, right? So what you want to do is when you found your object on the camera sensor, what you can do is say, okay, it's right here. That's where the object is. I want to use that area, and you can go back up here and set it as your region of interest. Okay, because all the rest of the area, because you're focused on only the area where the planet is, all the rest of the area is just black. So what's the point in having it? And so when you get rid of that, because you're taking such a smaller resolution now, or recording another smaller resolution now, rate goes up. Okay. So anyway, let's see what else do we have here.
Does that camera allow you to do the high speed and bandwidth, the USB speed, like on the 120?
You mean as like, does it control the USB traffic?
Yeah, under the more button there, under where gamma is under control.
Oh, that, yeah, it's right there. So right here, that's what you're talking about?
Yeah, so you don't even have high speed turned on yet at this point. So
no,
yeah, so you can even turn it up more.
Yeah, I just set it right in the middle is what I've never had that problem. So yeah, I guess you could do that if you want, but I always had the USB traffic set to the middle, so, you know.
Yeah, the ZWOs tend to lock up if you throw too much through USB sometimes.
Oh, okay. Well, good to know. Thanks.
But yeah, the high speed can help, especially if you're doing deep sky stuff.
Oh, deep sky?
Mm-hmm.
Did you say deep sky?
Yeah. With 16-bit, it helps in particular because of the additional bandwidth.
Okay. All right. Very good. Okay, so the other thing too to remember is that you need to set, because this is in color, it's going to interpret some light sources as a color that you're not used to seeing. So what you can do is you can adjust the opposite ends of the spectrum, right? Like red. You turn down red, you're getting close to cyan, which is more on the blue-green side. All right, so you have full blue, no red, so you're mostly cyan. If you boost both red and blue, you get something like orange or yellow if you were to look at this on a color balance slider. But if you turn blue down all the way, it gets closer to red. Okay, so anyway, you just need to adjust these according to taste. So if you like looking at a planet and you see that Saturn is blue, well, obviously you'll probably want to turn the blue down a little bit, because in most cases Saturn's a little bit on the yellow side. So yeah, turn on the blue a little bit. But yeah, so there's all these different settings that are in Fire Capture. I mean, it'd take me forever to go through these. I'm just trying to give you just a rundown of just acquiring recordings. And now, if you were to take a color recording and you want to do a 16-bit, you see how 16-bit here, the option for 16-bit is not lit up. I don't have the option to do that. So, and the reason why that is because I'm currently debayering the preview. So what I would do in this case when I'm doing a color recording, what I will do is I will go in and check. Here's the debayer icon. I would check to see how the settings are set up. So right now it's set to bilinear and RG. That's usually the default. I'll almost always keep it there. There's that one algorithm I was talking about earlier called nearest neighbor. But I usually always keep it at bilinear and RG because a previous program that I used, what was it, that came with imaging source cameras. I don't remember what program that's called, but another program that I would use as well that Mike talked about a while back with, well, not a while back, but the other day when we were talking about Astra cameras or selecting an camera for imaging. As he talked about K3CCD tools, and this was the option that always gave me the best results. So I've just left it there as is. So, but anyway, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a recording, but again, like I was saying in the presentation, I want to do a 16-bit recording. So what I'll do is, what you have to do to get that to light up on the toolbar there, you have to remove debayer. Now, since I've already got the color balanced the way I want, I've already selected how I want the camera or the stacking program to debayer the information that's in the recording. I deselect debayer, goes to black and white. It has this weird grid pattern to it, but don't worry, everything is still in place. Now I can select 16-bit, okay? Now, if you remember, let's see, I'm sure I did it. Well, it's not as bad, but if you remember, I was able to go up to almost 200 earlier. Well, when you get to 16-bit, it's like I was talking about earlier, it takes more computing power and more labor for the sensor to capture all that, all those shades of color. So anyway, that's what will happen with that. I'm not going to take a recording of RGB. What I'd like to do is I'll demonstrate that with a mono camera instead. So anyway, any questions about RGB? No? Or does anybody have any input of anything that I may have missed? No? Okay. All right. Just because of the nature of this computer, I'm going to have to start this all over again. Let's see. Okay. All right, so just hold up and I'll get the mono one connected. Okay. All right, let's see. So that mono camera that I had, the ASI 290, is what I'm using these days, and I'll show you my latest Mars image at the end here when we're done doing all this stuff. Let's see. Okay, let me fire capture again. Okay, here I am. Let's see. Let me do this again. And okay, so there we go. So this is the mono camera hooked up to it, and again, I just have just Saturn, just chose Saturn. And again, I have it set to the SER format. And let's say I'm looking for Saturn. And one advantage of before you choose region of interest, which is a little small area where you found your planet, as you can imagine, with the sensor being bigger, when you're trying to like center your actual planet, say like it's over here or it's over here. Well, if you're trying to get it centered and you're using the region of interest, obviously you're not going to find it. So you can kind of picture this from an eyepiece kind of analogy. When you want to look for an object, you want to use a low power eyepiece to actually find it. So in that case, if you use the larger amount of resolution that the camera has to offer, you can it'll help you find your the object that you're trying to look for a lot easier. Hold on 1 second. Let me get this straight here. Okay. Okay. Anyway. Okay. So it's a mono camera, so I have to select which filters I want to use. So in this case, I have a selection of IR filter. I have red, but I'm not going to use red. I'm going to use IR as my red. Then I have green, then I have blue. And so what I would do is pretty much exactly the same thing that you just saw with the with the RGB filter. It has an RGB filter still here for a mono camera, but remember, these are just settings for the filter that you might be using, okay? So RGB, well, these are the settings you would use if you're using a color camera, whereas these, you can use these filters and set them up, say I select green, for example. So if I select green, what is it? I can customize what I want to do. So say like I want to do 2,000 frames with green. Let's see, what else can I do here? Oh yeah, we'll say green is a little on the dark side, so I can like boost the gain a little bit to get the show up. Or if I'm hating my gain, I can always boost the exposure so that I don't see as much graininess going on there. So anyway, so that customizes the green filter. Now, if I want to go over to infrared, again, it reset the settings here for where I had this at 2,000. It put exposure all the way down where I had it all the way up for green. So you see how these filters can be customized. So what you want to do is that before you get started taking an image sequence, what you want to do is you want to get your filters set up on Planetary imaging. So you need to know how much exposure and gain that you want to use for your infrared, for your green, and your blue. So let's go ahead and do just let's make this whole big area right there. Okay. Okay, so for infrared, so let's say that these, let me boost exposure, just you know, have fun here. Okay, so let's say that the planet shows up nicely with these settings. Okay, so that's my infrared. Now, you can't see this, but infrared is #1 on my filter wheel here. So when I move it over to 2, it looks a little bit different. Oops, no, actually, that's not 2, that's 5, where there's nothing. There's 2, so that's pretty dark right there, right? So yeah, that was my infrared. Actually, I just didn't have it steered right. And there's my green, okay? So you can barely see it show up. So obviously, if I want to do green, I want to boost my exposure. Oops, because I'm still on infrared, so I need to set this to green. Hold on. Okay, so obviously when I'm on green, I need my exposure to be way up. So here my exposure is already pretty high. So the only choice I have is to bring the gain up. So let's see that green is really bright. So we'll set it at that. Okay, so next you go to blue. And it looks like I had it pretty close to that, but anyway. So here's what my blue filter looks like. So it's darker still. So I don't know. Well, let me just drown out blue, make it nice and white. Okay. So there's blue. There's my settings for infrared. So we can go back to infrared. There's infrared. Now I go over to green, set the program to green. There's my green. Now I flip over to a blue, and there's my blue. Okay, remember how we drowned that one out. Now, so what I can do is, let's see. I'm not going to record this in 16-bit. I'm just going to, let's see, because I usually have this on an external drive. I'm just going to set the folder to, let's see, to my desktop here. Okay, so I set the folder to my desktop and I'm going to save it. So yeah, so I would recommend using 16-bit, but for our purposes, I'm not going to use 16-bit because I'm just going to show you an example of how this stuff works. So I have it set to, actually, let's do a lot less than that. I don't know, 100 frames, that's good enough. Actually, no, that's not going to work because the frame rate's pretty high. Let's do 1,000. Okay. All right, so I'm about to start my capture, and bam, I'm recording. Up here is the status of what's remaining as far as my the number of frames I have left, and I'm finished. And what it usually does is it automatically goes back, because it's a mono camera. Whatever I have set, let's see, I think it's here. Oops, not ADC. Let's see, where did I have this thing? Okay. Yeah, whatever I have set up in my sequence, this is a presetting for making an image sequence. You go to the filters icon, which is this guy right here. You can set this, you can bring up whatever icons you want to be put up onto this toolbar, sort of as a shortcut icon. But I have red as my first one, green as my second one, and blue as my next one. Okay, so that's probably what happened. I was taking the blue, and the program was nice enough to go over to red. Okay, so why don't we just go ahead and make red 1,000. Let's do infrared, because I'm not going to use red. We'll make that 1,000. And green 1,000. Okay, so all my filters I'm going to use are set to 1,000 to capture only 1,000 frames. Okay, so down here, let me set up my imaging sequence. Now, I told you I don't have red, but I do have infrared, which I like to use in place of my infrared. So this will be the sequence I want to use if I want to set up an auto run, which is this icon up here. The auto run will also, you can set up as many auto runs as you like, and you can put as long as of a delay between the filters that you have in the auto run. Okay, so let's go up there and look at the auto run. You should already have it set up there, and it does. Okay, so right now it has it set to 3. So this is what it looks like at once, because I set my filter sequence to infrared, green, and blue. It's going to, and I have this click, it's going to use what it thinks are the 3 filters I'm going to use in my imaging run. Now, you could do more than 3 filters. You probably remember back at that icon down here, you can set more than just 3 filters if you want to. But to give you an idea of how auto run works, so I have one run set up here. Now, how many delays do I want in between each one? I can set right here. So I can start with an initial delay of 10 seconds, okay, and it'll just wait 10 seconds, and then it'll start recording infrared, and then it'll wait 10 seconds, and it'll start recording green, and then it'll wait 10 seconds to start recording blue. Now this is where Chris is just like running all over. I'm just running all over the place, trying to readjust the focus for each filter before. I usually do 20 seconds before that 20 seconds is up, and moving it to the correct filter. And then once that's done, hopefully after 20, I've got it done after 20 seconds, it'll move on to the next filter. So here we go. Here's how it works. So we'll start the auto run. If I want to do more than one, obviously, I can do as many as I want. We're only going to do one. Yeah. So there it is, counting down. I'm hoping I had, no, it didn't have it set to 2,000 seconds. Okay, cancel auto run. Anyway, but I don't know why I decided to go to some other, oh yeah, well the limit's here. Yeah, the limit here was supposed to be set to 1,000 frames. But anyway, it moves from this filter to that filter to that filter. Let me just say it like that. So, I don't know. I guess we can just do a quickie. We'll just do it like that. And we'll do 3 seconds. So there you go, countdown 3, 2, 1. Collects. Next. Collects. And next. And there we go. We're done with an imaging run. Okay, so that's how fire capture works. So does anybody have any input? No? Okay. All right, so I guess we'll get on to the good stuff, or at least I like to think it's the good stuff. Let me go over to my Flickr page, and I'll just go through some of the things that I've taken over the years. So let's see. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so planetary imaging. So this is a quick album I threw together right before the meeting. So let's see what we got for, oh yeah, okay. So this was Memorial Day, it was 2015. It was Memorial Day 2015 when I took this. I like doing, taking pictures of plants during the day. Everybody knows that about me. And then let's see. Okay, so this is a time lapse I did using what I just showed you in the auto run sequence. So you got 2 moons going this way, and you got 1 moon coming out, going eventually will go behind the planet. And then here's another one. Let's see. No, I do not want to upgrade yet. And this one was pretty cool too. So that's the moon Europa casting a shadow on Jupiter. Let's see what's next. And then finally, there's this one as far as time lapses go. And this isn't really a time lapse. This is my masterpiece. What I did is I went out once every 10 days, and I took an image of using pretty much the equipment I just showed you. I took an image of Venus every 10 days. And I did this for a year and a half. So Venus, obviously, if you go out to image that, it'll show up as a crescent. You'll never get to see it quite full unless you are able to get a good look at it when it's back here, which can be kind of dangerous because the sun will probably get close to your field of view, or get close to your telescope and leaking into it and catching it on fire and whatnot. Okay, so let's see what's next. Oh yeah, so you remember that image or that sequence of Jupiter. What I did with each image is I just took a slice out of the current meridian that you were seeing of each image that was put together in that time lapse. And there you go, got myself half a map of Jupiter. And then there's a frame from that video. There's another frame from the other video. Let's see, no, I don't want to. Here's my only good image of Mercury. So not very impressive, but hey, what are you going to do? It's pretty hard planet to image there. Here's Mars using a monocam, so I was able to get the clouds to show up. And I think this came on the next day, but the next day it rotated just a little bit, but of course the weather pattern changed, and right here these little breaks in the clouds are actually the peaks of, I think it's called the Tharsis Bulge area. There's you probably have seen on maps of Mars, there's 3 volcanoes going across. And then let's see, so that's my best image of Saturn. Yeah, whatever, I'd like to get more, I'll do more of Saturn. That is my best image of Jupiter. What's nice about this image is that you can't really see it here, but this is Ganymede, and I actually was able to pick up a little bit of detail on Ganymede there. But anyways, so let's see what else we got. There's Venus. Now this was a day where UV came actually worked out, so you can see a little bit of the cloud patterns there. That was with a UV filter. There's an image of Uranus. You can probably see the moons a little better. There's the images of the planet and moons combined. This is Mars with a color camera, and this should basically tell you that it's hard to capture anything in the blue part of the spectrum, although it looks like I may have gotten some clouds there. So this is with a color camera. Looks nice, but I wasn't able to catch very much of the blue area or blue signal that may have been on Mars at the time. So I imagine this probably would have been more extensive going this way. So let's see, what else do we have? That is what an 8-bit bad seeing image of Jupiter would look like. So nice and blurred because of the bad seeing, but I don't know if you can see it here, but you may see what's turned onion ringing right here. You see it right there. That usually happens if you use an 8-bit format of capture. So let's see what else we have. I don't want to see an ad. This was kind of a neat phenomenon. There was, I think this was back, I think this was 2010 maybe, where the southern equatorial belt of Jupiter just disappeared, and it looked like the spot, the great red spot, was just completely by itself. And there's my most current image of Mars. So that was a week ago. Those are the individual channels. This is what blue picked up, so obviously it was brutalized by the scene. Green picked up a little more, and of course infrared, like I said, the long wavelengths are not as affected by seeing as the shorter ones. So, okay. Yeah, that's it. I don't have anything else to show, so I guess we'll stop there. And if anybody has any images to show, or if anybody has any questions, fire away. Let's do the questions first. Anybody have any questions? No? Okay. All right, so who's got images to show us?
But the question is, it's getting late. Do people want to see images now?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I can do it.
I was hoping that would be shorter, but didn't work out.
That's all right. I just assume I share my screen. Is that?
Oh, wow. Wow.
Is that there? I can't see it on my screen. So.
Yeah, I can see it. It's really nice. The veil.
All right, let me bring these up individually. That's the veil. These are all from my driveway with 135 millimeter Rokinon lens at f4. Almost everything here is that. Usually about 3 minutes of exposure for an hour up to 3 hours, depending on which one it is. And it's an ATIC 460 EX camera. And so this is, I don't know, this is September 27th. It's about 90 minutes of the veil. I was trying to get the Pickering's triangle here. That's the thing I was looking for, is getting the stuff, not just the things that are on the outside, but the things that are on the inside. And then I've been playing with the Pixton Sight's way of getting rid of stars, just to bring up the nebulae.
What's the name of that program?
What's that?
That's StarNet, right?
That's the StarNet that's now built into Pixton Sight.
Oh, that's nice. I didn't know that. Okay.
It's a nice thing to have because you can take out the stars, fiddle with the nebulosity, and then put it back in again, so you can bring out the nebulosity relative to the stars. So it's kind of a fun
Oh, okay. So it's like the ultimate star mask almost.
It's just, and you can make a star mask with it as well if you wish. And so that there are a variety of things you can do with it. And so most of these I've done that. That's the North American Pelican. This is the start of a mosaic, which you'll see later. And there's the stars taken out. So you see the more of the nebulosity.
Well, you're able to squeeze out more right there.
But you squeeze out a lot more. There's the Cedar region with the crescent down in the lower left. It's roughly the same amount of time. I guess it's the same setup. This is about 40 minutes, I guess. And then there it is without the stars, more or less without the stars. Sator's still there.
That's really nice.
And now I'm making a mosaic of that area. So I did this one, which is one we just saw, and then this one, which we saw before. So I added a panel in the middle. And actually, this is 2 panels. There's one right here and one up here to bring Deneb in as well. So I'm doing this entire area in HA right now. And I've done four of the panels so far. And then I use the PixInsights imaging software to label things and put them in so you can see what things are, which is very easy to use. It's kind of fun to be able to identify things that way. And then there it is again without the images. But this is without the extra panel. This is the 3-panel one, not the 4-panel one. That's an earlier one. Okay, and then there's the bubble is up here. It's hard to see in HA up here, but there it is. The Lobster Nebula and the Cave Nebula in that area. And then if you take the stars out again, you can see there's a lot of nebulosity there.
So what kind of camera was that? Or lens, rather?
This is my 135 millimeter Rokinon lens. And the nice thing about it is you can set the f-stop real easily just by hand in that one. Whereas the regular Canon lenses, you have to stick it in the camera and fiddle with it to change the f-stop. So I like the Rokinon lens for that purpose. And there's the elephant trunk and the flying bat in HA. It's a 2-panel mosaic.
So you're going to try to catch the squid in there?
Yes, and I tried with an oxygen filter, but I couldn't see it that night because the moon was out. It just completely washed everything out. So the next chance I get, I'll be looking for the squid in there. But I tried, but I failed to get anything on the night with the moon. And there's with the stars out again. And then there's the flying bat, sans the squid. And then there's with oxygen. At least the oxygen was there at the mid-color, but the squid still wasn't visible inside there. So I have to keep trying on that one. And then there's the Lion Nebula. This is from 2 nights ago, I guess.
Where is that?
That's in Cepheus. It's north in the sky, or toward the zenith in the sky of the elephant trunk.
Okay.
So that's this is about. I've done 4 hours on this over the past.
I don't know if I've seen that before.
Yeah, and it's very nice. Well, I'll add oxygen and sulfur onto it because it's very pretty with all three. But this is only hydrogen alpha. And then again, like I said, I took the stars out just so you could see the nebulosity better. And then there's my one planetary. The moon is an HDR, so there's some color in the moon, and then Mars. This is from, I don't know, 10 days ago, maybe something like that. I can't remember now. October 2nd. And that's with a 200 millimeter lens just on a camera on a tripod. And then this is from my driveway. Again, I was trying to see if I used my ASI 071 color 1-shot color to do Andromeda for my driveway. And this is about 45 minutes maybe of 1 minute exposure, something like that.
That's pretty good, considering.
And then I took out the stars again for that. See it again. So it's all from the top of my driveway here over various nights when it's getting clear. And so I'm going to work more on that mosaic around the North American Nebula and the Sator region in Cygnus. And I'll do more on the Lion too in the next week or so, depending on the skies. So that's what I've got this. So stop sharing, I guess. How do I do that? Oh, there it is.
Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay. Yeah. I guess the meeting ran pretty long, so whoever's here, I apologize for that. But our next meeting, actually, the topic's already been decided. There was a little bit of discussion at the workshop about choosing an astro camera, about EAA, and Mike Keefe said that he would do a presentation based on his experiences with it. So that's probably what's going to happen at the next meeting. So I say probably as in that was, 2 weeks ago. Make sure that he's still up for it. So anyway.